embrace that liminality of I don't know what the categories are, what they should be. Can I live without having solid categories? Can I find my way through when the categories are just kind of fluffy? And you're giggling because you knew me. Because you knew me when I could not tolerate that.
That is why I'm laughing.
I was not able to tolerate that lack of categorization at all. And that was so painful and so hard.
Welcome to Making Polyamory Work. Hi, I'm Libby Sinback, and I want to thank you for joining me today. I'm a queer polyamorous mom and a relationship transformation coach, and I'm here to help you if you're feeling stuck, if you're struggling, if you want your relationships to be more nourishing, more functional, more authentic, and full of love. On my show, I go deep into so many different aspects of what makes polyamorous relationships actually work, because I believe that relationships are at the core of our well-being as humans. I think love is why we're here and how we heal. I am so excited about this episode because it is talking about queerness and what it's like to realize you're queer later in life, and that has been such a journey for me, and I think I'm not alone. I think there are a lot of people who have had that journey, including one of my oldest and dearest friends who will be joining you on this episode. Before we jump into that, I want to tell you that I'm excited to finally announce that I have launched the Relational Non-Monogamy Circle. It is live. You can access it by going to relationalnonmonogamy.com. So what is the Relational Non-Monogamy Circle? It is a group coaching program because I am regularly getting maxed out on the number of coaching clients that I can take individually. So I decided to offer this program to more people at a more affordable price than my individual custom coaching is. So the Relational Non-Monogamy Circle, I encourage you to just go check it out on the website, but briefly I will tell you that we are going to dive deep together. There will be teaching on topics that I talk about on the podcast, but going in much greater depth with worksheets and practice scripts and all different kinds of things so that you can get your hands really deep into stuff and also ask me questions. And in addition to that, we're going to have twice monthly group coaching calls where it's nothing but you're in the hot seat getting coached by me, but in a group. So if this sounds like something that you would like to do, you'd like to join a community of folks who are all working on their relationships together, I encourage you to go over to relationalnonmonogamy.com. All right, now we're just going to dive into this conversation with Mara about queerness. So for today's episode, I have invited a person who I adore and am very close to.
Hello. Thank you, Libby, for having me here. I'm excited to do this together. My name is Mara, pronouns she, her. I am a queer femme, cisgender, polyamorous kinkster. I've been around in the polyamory and kink community since about 2009. And in keeping with today's theme of the episode, I came into my queerness a few years after my entry into the kink community. So I was in my mid-30s when I started figuring that out for myself.
Yeah, and the reason why we're doing this episode, thank you very much for leading right in. The theme for today's episode is realizing you're queer later in life. Well, first of all, I got a listener question reaching out to me, and it was actually the partner of someone who their partner was realizing that they were queer, and really that was rocking their world, and they were having a huge reckoning about it. And the partner wanted to know, well, are there any resources for people who are going through this, who are realizing they're bisexual or maybe they're gay? As someone who, in this case, is in a heterosexual marriage and has been for years with children, and what do you do? How do you work through that, make sense of that? And for the purpose of this episode, I mostly want to talk about not what do you do about your marriage and what do you do about all of the structural stuff that you have in place, because that is going to take some time, but more, how do you understand yourself in this new paradigm? And Mara and I both have talked about going through this ourselves. I don't want to speak for Mara's story, but I'll say for my story, I always knew I was queer. I think for a little while I was running from the idea that I was queer because I grew up in a very conservative Southern community where most everyone I knew was pretty religious and anti-gay, even though my family was very welcoming of homosexuality and affirming of that. It, to me, really didn't feel like a safe thing that I could embrace about myself. As a cisgender woman, I was attracted to cisgender men. I was like, well, cool, I'm covered. I don't have to worry about that. And then, of course, that was not even close to the whole story for me. And I have encountered this a lot with polyamorous folks of all genders, realizing, hey, I'm not who I thought I was.
Absolutely.
But they don't realize it until later because, especially if you're someone like Mara, you're how old now?
I'm 41 now.
Yep. And I'm 42. And I think when you're realizing it sort of after the heyday of your youth has passed, perhaps, it can be a really earth-shattering realization about yourself.
We missed out the queer in college.
Yeah, well, there's that. Yeah. But so I want to talk about that. But I guess I want to back up just a little bit because I want to ask you, Mara, what does queer even mean to you?
Oh, what does queer mean? I mean, to me, queerness is both about being not cis, not straight, or both. It's a political thing. It's a philosophical thing. It is letting go of the categories, turning them upside down, giving them a good shaking, and figuring out a new way of being. It is specifically not following the old rules and the old categories.
And the old scripts.
And the old script. Throwing away, wadding them up and burning them.
Right. Yeah.
So for me, queerness is very much a political thing and a philosophical thing. From a straight up just who am I attracted to, I would more use the word bisexual to describe myself.
Okay.
In that I'm attracted to my gender and other genders. That's really how I define bisexuality. And so my attraction spans pretty much everyone. You know, I've dated men, women, non-binary people, femmes, etc. People I've dated and been attracted to have been all over the map.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you define that as bisexual. Some people define that as pansexual, and we're not going to get into the debate about it here.
Because it's such a debate.
Well, and it seems a little unnecessary in my view, but I think if you're trying to be inclusive, then be inclusive. Some people think bisexuality is reinforcing the gender binary. The way Mara defines it, it does not obviously reinforce the gender binary. It reinforces the binary between me and other people and my gender and other people's genders. But some people define it differently, and so they prefer to use pansexual to say that they're inclusive of non-binary people, two-spirit people, et cetera, you know, all the different genderqueer folks, all the spectrum of genders, because gender's a construct.
Such a construct. And I don't see bisexual as being exclusive of that.
Right. But we're not going to dig into that debate. If you are interested in going down a rabbit hole, do a Google search is all I got to tell you.
Such a rabbit hole.
You know, for me, my queerness, it's a little different. And for a while, I would say I identified as bisexual in the same way that you would describe your sexuality, like my gender and other people's genders. But then I realized a couple things. The first thing is that I am not sexually driven in my attraction to people. So it didn't actually make sense to me to define myself as bisexual. And I actually kind of identify on the asexual spectrum. And that alone is included in queerness, which is kind of an interesting thing. But however, I am also in a heterosexual marriage. So there's some passing privilege that comes with my queerness that I have to name there. And I also am very attracted to cisgender men. I also am very attracted to pretty much anyone. Gender isn't really a relevant category for me to define my attraction by. Gender isn't, bodies aren't, body parts aren't. I'm not really interested in those things. I'm far more interested in energy, general aesthetic, banter, sense of humor. Like all of those things are sort of the greater vectors of my attraction. The first thing I'm thinking about with a new person isn't whether we're going to have sex and what the sex is going to be like. That's actually not the thing that drives me.
Yeah. Although I will say that when people do their gender in a really beautiful way, It's just gorgeous.
It's hot. No, I mean, and that's the thing.
So hot.
But see, I see that as aesthetic attraction.
Yeah.
Because I'm like just admiring a work of art, and I'm going, whew,
that's some queers are such works of art.
Oh my God.
Oh, queers.
Well, that's why it's a rainbow. It's a rainbow.
It's great.
It really is. Taste the rainbow. Anyway, I think what might be really nice here is to talk about our stories and how we got here, because as I said, we both kind of landed in our queerness. At least for me, again, it was there inside of me, but it was very denied. I guess I'd love to hear your story, Mara, if you're willing to share it.
Definitely. I grew up super Christian, grew up very Catholic, and then my teenage rebellion was going to evangelical church. So like super, super Christian, super religious with all of that implies. It didn't even occur to me that being queer would be or could be a thing. Like I remember talking about how, I mean, of course women are gorgeous, but everyone knows that. But, I'm straight. And looking back, I'm like, oh, baby egg Mara. So my evolution really was in my 20s, I was letting go of those religious beliefs in a very big way. And then 29, I entered the kink community. Through there, I landed in the polyamorous community very quickly.
Right. Yeah.
I became polyamorous when one of my first play partners was like, I'd be interested in dating, but I'm poly, and that's how I do relationships. So you should go check that out. And if you're interested, we can pursue this. And if you're not, then cool, bye. So I did some research and I was like, oh, this is an option. You can have relationships that don't need to follow the relationship escalator. You can have relationships that don't just have to be with the purpose of finding the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with and have little straight babies with. This is a thing that exists, and you can just follow a relationship as long as it is good and as a good relationship and still look for the one. Yeah.
Or not.
And then a little bit later, or not. So there was a lot of letting go of all my categories at that point. There was a lot of letting go of my ideas about what relationships were and what relationships were for and what doing relationships with people was like.
How much of that was as a result of just modeling, like what you were able to see other people doing?
I think that seeing other people around me doing it definitely helped. Oh, this is a thing people can do.
Yeah.
This is a thing that people can do and be happy and be functional humans who I like as people and who I think are mature, emotionally aware adults.
Who are also doing all the life things, like if they want to, having families, if they want to, having chosen family communities, all different kinds of stuff.
And heck, I mean, the number of people in the community where I was who have security clearances was wild.
Well, you know what I'm thinking there? It's a little bit like if you think about heterosexuality as the standard, right? A lot of people talk about compulsory monogamy. I also think we live in a culture of compulsory heterosexuality.
Absolutely.
And cisgenderness. Those are all compulsory in our culture. It's sort of like going to a restaurant and you have one thing on the menu.
Yeah, this is the menu.
But there's one thing you can order, and that's it. This
is what's for dinner.
And then it's sort of like going to the same restaurant, sitting down in a different section, and someone slipping you the secret menu. And it's got 20,000 things on it, and all of a sudden it's like, oh shit.
You could be anything.
I could order anything on the menu that I want, and if I want something specially prepared by the chef, that's an option too.
Right.
What?
Right. So during my 30s, I was going through all of this. Oh, wow, relationships can be all of this way. I was also learning about gender theory and about, letting go of my ideas about binary gender and how that's all bullshit.
This might be a good moment to mention that you were a philosophy major.
I was a philosophy major in college, so the thinky stuff is really big for me.
Well, and I feel like you are a person, and not everyone's like this, you're a person who really likes to do her research.
Oh my goodness, the research.
You like reading all the books, all the blog posts. I think you like to wrap your intellect around things.
I do. I like to know things, and then once I know things, I can start to allow myself to feel things.
Yeah. So it looked like for you, one of the things that being in community gave you was a validation to try these things, to explore these things for yourself, and then to reflect it back when seeing the ideas that you had about yourself reflected in other people kind of helped gel it for you, it sounds like.
Definitely. And then through all of this time, I started realizing that my ideas about gender and attraction also needed to be thrown away and given a good shaking.
Yeah.
So I started doing kinky play with women. I started doing kinky play with everyone and just letting go of all of these ideas. And I was actually in a long-term relationship with a cis man at the time. And my first girlfriend was actually my metamor. So just sort of realizing, like,
are you
this
saying
can be anything.
Are you saying that's an FFM triad?
No. Yes. No, we decided that she was our unicorn. Yeah. She claimed it. She claimed it. But we did not get there on purpose. She was a very accidental unicorn.
So your first girlfriend was your metamor. What was that like?
Unstable. It didn't actually stay a triad very long. And then the two of them broke up. And then I was dating both of them separately for a while.
So you were the hinge for a while.
So, yeah. So, first he was the hinge for a while, and then I was a hinge for a while.
So that was sort of the first foray of, hey, I am queer.
Yeah.
I like to have sex
That was
with
when I was
women
like, I own this.
Yeah.
That was when I had come to the place of really being able to own my queerness.
Yeah.
And that was also when I came out to my family, was
oh wow,
when I had to say, like, no, I'm going with my boyfriend and my girlfriend. And we were going to be traveling. And like, no, we're all together.
How is your relationship ecosystem now? Because I don't think you're in either of those relationships currently, right?
Not anymore. I have only been seeing one person for quite some time who is a non-binary person, uses all pronouns, and they are absolutely delightful. We've been together for about 5 years, and it's been a very low-contact relationship, but really solid and good. Yeah, I've got a comet who is a cis man, but he's not straight, and have had a first date with another cutie a little while ago, and we'll see what happens there.
Cool.
But yeah, that's sort of where my ecosystem is right now. And then I have friends who are deeply, deeply important to me. There's there's my bromance, who's a non-sexual partnership also. Like, I have my queer family, which is in some ways as important or more important than my named polyamorous relationships. I actually get very, very confused when I try to define what is a partner and what is a loved one who's not a partner but is still family or incredibly integral to my life functioning and part of my emotional well-being. What's the difference really? And when you get into the point where you've thrown away all these categories where relationship isn't about sex and it isn't about exclusivity.
It's not about gender.
And it's not about gender. And it's not about having kids. What is the difference anyway?
I think it's all about, relationality and how you show up with people and how you are consistent and commit to them and blah. But anyway, that's like a whole other thing. So would you say you identify as like solo poly now?
That's probably the best description. I don't hold that as an identity per se.
Okay.
I'm opening to that shifting, but functionally, that's the way I'm living my life right now.
I love your story. When I met Mara, so Mara and I have known each other for about 20 years. And when I met her, she was like, I'm going to get married and have babies, and we're going to have a lovely Christian family. And
yeah, I said that. I thought that.
And, it's been really amazing to watch and be part of your journey. It's quite an arc, and it's a continuing arc, which I kind of love. That's kind of the thing I love about when you're willing to like not hold on to this one thing on the menu anymore, and you're willing to create your life, your sexuality, your attraction, your relationships, and you're using all the colors of the palette.
Every single one I could think of.
Yeah. Well, then there's this freedom, and the thing is, you can bring back things you liked about your old self if you want to. It's up to you. It's not similar to my story. My story is different, but I would say there are elements that are the same. For me, I think I never really thought I would get married, and I never thought I would have babies. And it's kind of funny that she was the one that wanted to get married and have babies and didn't. And I'm the one that didn't want to get married and have babies, and I did.
It never fails to make me laugh.
But when I was much younger, I knew I was attracted to non-cis men, but I felt like I was still very caught in the binary. Either you're gay or you're straight. I was definitely attracted to heterosexual cisgender men. And so I figured, well, if I have to pick a side, I can be gay, but there are not as many gay people as there are straight people. And so like I was actually calculating the odds of not being alone at that time when I was quite young. And I was like, well, I feel like there are more people that I would meet if I declared myself as straight. So I did. Because I also got the sense that, and we can talk about this a little bit more, that bisexual wasn't really an option. Instead of choosing either gay or straight, you were choosing neither side because neither side would accept you. And I think that's still, to an extent, somewhat true, don't you think?
I mean, that has not been my experience.
I mean, it's not true in the polyamory community. In the polyamory community, bisexuality is sometimes presumed, especially if you're a woman.
Yeah, I mean, bisexual women and straight men is such a thing in some pieces of the community, which...
So, but at the time when I was younger, I didn't know about all this stuff, so I really felt like I had to choose. And so I was like, well, I'm going to go with the best odds of compatibility for myself. Not knowing, of course, what I know now, which is actually not true. The truth is that the more I look for people who are just like me, the greater chances I'm going to have finding someone who's compatible. And so it was very silly for me to think that by picking the biggest chunk of the pie that I would increase my likelihood of finding a partner. Not true, given that my husband is also queer and he identifies as a cis man, but he's not really committed to the idea at all. Not a very masculine person by his own definition of himself. So at the end of the day, we're queer over here.
Yeah, it's a pretty queer house.
I really didn't feel like I could be bisexual until I became polyamorous. And then I started, similar to you, I started seeing what I wanted, what I sort of dreamed but never thought was possible, actually existing in the world in front of me. And I was going, oh, I can do that. And that's a thing. And that's a thing people can do. Again, I sort of engaged in a lot of queer sexual acts when I was in my 20s, but it always felt like this thing that I would have to give up in order to have a long-term partner or something like that. So to find that it wasn't true at all, that I could have my cake and pie on the same plate.
All of the desserts.
Which is great. I love I have so many food metaphors, right?
Well, people are snacks after all.
I'm a whole meal. So that was such a freeing thing. Again, same as you, I suddenly was like, oh, I don't need any of these scripts. I don't need the straight script or the gay script. I can use the queer script. And the queer script is whoever you are is whoever you are. And then when I kind of came into understanding my asexuality in addition to my queerness, suddenly it was like, oh, I can really redefine everything. Now that we've kind of shared our stories, I want to delve into the advice giving portion of the episode here because I had someone reach out to me, someone at the beginning of this journey of discovering and understanding their queerness. What should they be doing? How can they be supported? I'll tell you the first thing that comes up for me is, I think the thing that helped us both was finding our people.
Totally true.
I don't think anything has been more powerful for me than meeting other people who have gone through this self-discovery process, either young or as a grown adult, and people who are living in a way that is in alignment with who they are so that you can see what the possibilities are. So you can get that secret menu and see if anything on there appeals to you.
So you can look at what's on the other table and say, oh, I want that.
Right. Yeah, that's true. You got to go to the back section of the restaurant where everybody's eating the things so you can see.
What's that?
And then ask them. And I think you and I both have had the experience of one of the really, really helpful things is to have queer role models. Yeah. And initially I was thinking about people who are famous, but then
Janelle Monáe, Elliot Page.
Yeah, those folks are, I think, role models. But I think for me, I think about people who I know more closely. And I think,
really my role model is my friends. It's the people that I go to parties with. It's the people that I drink late night coffee with. It's the people that I know them and I know their partners and I see how they explore their gender and see how they explore their relationships. And those are my role models. Those are my people.
Yeah, same. One of the things that was so hugely helpful for me was to be part of a community where someone could talk about, oh, I remember what it was like when I was a baby queer and I was trying to make sense of myself. Just having certain things that you're thinking about or going through really normalized for you by having it be a shared experience can be really meaningful. And speaking of being a baby queer, What did we say the one single most shared experience among all queer people is?
We all believe that we are not queer enough. Every single one of us has had the experience of feeling that I'm not queer enough to go to that party, or my haircut's not queer enough, or other queers aren't going to recognize me, or I shouldn't be there because I haven't even kissed someone as the same gender as me, so clearly I'm not queer enough.
Well, or I have a partner that presents, our relationship presents as heterosexual, and so we don't belong at Pride.
Yeah, I look like I'm in a straight relationship, so I'm not queer enough.
Yeah, never mind that you don't actually know anything about what someone is by what they look like.
Right.
And you can look like the most conservative, conventionally appearing person in the universe. And that doesn't mean...
Maybe they're both non-binary. Like, you don't fucking know by looking.
But so if you're wondering, as you're listening to this, am I queer? You are if you say you are. It's kind of my position. And fuck anybody who is gatekeeping you out of an identity. Now, that being said, important disclaimer. Mara and I are both white. We're both cisgender. We're both able-bodied. We're both neurodiverse, neuroqueer in some kind of form, but we are fairly privileged. And so I know that I can say the same thing. I know that Mara feels the same way that I do, that when I'm in a queer space, I'm not likely to center myself. Yeah. I'm not likely to take up the most space in the room. And I think that is something to check if you tend to be more privileged.
I belong there, but that doesn't mean I belong as the center of attention.
Doesn't mean I'm the leader.
Exactly.
And I think that's important. You can claim the label, but I don't know that you're leading the parade. You can go to Pride.
Yeah.
That's advice I would give. Allow yourself to be whoever you want to be. And I like what you say before of queerness is not just an identity for some people. For some people it is. For some people, queerness is an orientation. For some people, queerness is an identity. For some people, queerness is a behavior. For some people, queerness is a political act and a philosophical act. And it's worth allowing that to be whatever it is for you, but recognizing where you're stepping if you want to step into certain kinds of spaces. But I think you're welcome.
Yeah.
It's just worth being careful about how much you center yourself.
Yeah.
But I think that's true in a lot of spaces.
Absolutely.
What's some other advice you would give to someone who's newly realizing they're queer?
So in terms of the thinky parts of it, the intellectual parts of it, I would really encourage people to lean into tearing down and building anew differently. Like, heteronormativity is such an edifice. It's like this incredibly solid building of interrelated elements.
Yeah.
And once you start pulling out a few of the Jenga pieces, you realize that there's no reason to keep any of it, at least not automatically.
Snaps.
Once you start letting go of pieces, you can really realize all of it can be rethought. All of it can be thought in different ways.
Yeah.
There's exploring what does gender even mean to you, and how does it apply to you, and how does it apply...
And reconstructing your notions of what's attractive and what's not attractive, because that's rooted in heteronormativity and patriarchy and racism.
Oh my goodness, the racism. Yeah, so just realizing there's so many ways that you can think about yourself, and some of coming into queerness might be like becoming more anti-racist, becoming more social justice oriented, maybe for some people, certainly for me. Just really let the building fall down and
don't rebuild it right away.
Yeah. And don't feel urgency about rebuilding it any particular way. Like, embrace that liminality of, I don't know what the categories are, what they should be. Can I live without having solid categories? Can I find my way through when the categories are just kind of fluffy? And you're giggling because you knew me. Because you knew me when I could not tolerate that.
That is why I'm laughing.
I was not able to tolerate that lack of categorization at all. And that was so painful and so hard.
Yeah, I remember we used to argue. Do you remember this argument we had at a bus stop years ago about male-female essentialism?
I disagree with myself then so hard. Past me, what were you thinking, past me?
You loved Kant. I don't know.
I loved JP too, is what I did. I loved the Pope.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Okay. Yeah.
I was reading the Pope's ideas about gender and Catholicism, and past me, what were you thinking?
Well, and I like what you said when we talked about this earlier, that in that vein, your inclination, if you really liked the label of straight and cis, even though you might not have used that to describe yourself, you might be inclined very quickly to stick some new labels on yourself, or you might really struggle with understanding yourself because you're trying to stick a label on and it doesn't fit. And I love what you said, which was don't try right away to stick a new label on yourself.
Or do, but hold that label very lightly.
Don't be afraid to
you can
let it go.
There's something about saying, I am feeling kind of bi these days without saying I am bisexual. My gender, what is gender anyway? But, woman works for me for right now, I think. You can sort of hold it lightly. And, right now I still identify as cis, and I still don't know if that's always going to be true. But right now it's just sort of an expansive idea of what being a woman is, because what is gender anyway?
Well, and I think on that vein, coming out, right?
Oh, coming out.
Well, and what I think about that is if you're going to hold your labels lightly, you might want to hold your coming out lightly. Here's a metaphor for you. When I think about when you're pregnant, right? You might not tell everybody, not everybody in the first trimester, not just because you might lose the pregnancy, because I actually really want to normalize miscarriage as a thing that is just part of pregnancy and not anything that you should hide. But you may not want to have everybody know about it until you've sort of internalized what it is for you first before you're telling everybody else. So I think it's okay if you realize you're queer and you want to hold on to that for a little while and turn it over inside yourself, maybe bounce it off a few safe people who you know are going to hold you lightly as well, and not have their own agenda for you, whether it is to pull that apart and challenge you, which is super shitty, or, try to smash a new label on you and say, you're one of us now, and here's how you have to be. They might see themselves in you, and they may want to spare you some of their own experience. They may have some desires for you that aren't necessarily about you, but they're about them. And so you want to have a trust in people that they're not going to do that with you, or that you can kind of hold your own. You're solid enough in your own experience to understand when someone else is sharing theirs, that that's about them, and that what your experience is about you. And you don't have to match them. You don't have to match their expectations of you. I think coming out is one of those things that I don't think you don't have to be a poster child for queerness right away.
No.
In understanding yourself, and you don't have to fly the rainbow flag. I do think that, though, if you are a privileged person and you do come to an understanding of yourself as queer, I think it's not a bad thing.
It's a community service.
One reason why that I am out as much as I am, and I think maybe this is how you feel too, is so that it makes it safer for other people to be out.
Absolutely.
But if you're one of those people where it's not safe, you would lose family members, you would lose access to your job, your housing, it's okay to hold yourself where you are first. Definitely. And protect yourself.
I am as loud as I am because of my privilege, definitely. Although I would also say on coming out, it's also fun to come out to strangers that you will never see again. That is a great way to sort of get your feet wet with how coming out is. You're never going to see this person again. If you flub it up, or if you tell them the wrong thing,
or if they freak out, who cares?
They don't matter to your life in any way.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I never thought of that.
Telling the barista a different name to write on your label or whatever it is.
That's true.
It's a nice way to sort of ease into the experiments before you
to try
start the high stakes coming outs of the people where you really care about their opinion and don't know how they'll react.
I really think when it's time, I think you just know. I know that sounds so cheesy, but I really do think there's a certain time when you know that if you continue to not tell people who you are, then you're not able to live in integrity anymore. And that'll be the time for you. And again, it's different for everybody. And for some people, it always feels like integrity to not tell them. Another thing I want to say, speaking of coming out and being in spaces where it's not safe to be queer, is to be prepared to confront your own internalized homophobia. because we live in a compulsive heterosexual society. We have homophobia running through our culture still. And I know I picked it up, even though I had a very queer, gay, affirming household, and I had friends who were gay in high school and middle school, but you can't avoid it.
Which is kind of funny because I did not go through that as much. And
that's interesting.
With my family background, you would have expected a lot more.
Yeah. But I would just say be prepared for that. Be prepared for the fear of yourself and the fear of what you might become. And it's okay to feel that. I would hold yourself very tenderly if that's the thing that you're feeling. And don't blame yourself for it either, because, homophobia is something like racism, like sexism, that we just breathe in a lot of cultures. And so if that's a thing that's going on for you, just be tender with it and acknowledge it within yourself and acknowledge the fears that might be coming up for you. And again, it might be useful to find a safe person to talk about that with, whether it's a queer friend that you trust or a counselor or someone like that can be a really good thing to work through.
And just having somebody see you can be really meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone who's really affirming, because it's a process. I mean, I really do like the analogy of birth, because you really are possibly rebirthing yourself in a way. Yeah. And you're growing into a different version of yourself. And it's really worth honoring all of that process.
Absolutely.
Including the grief that might come with it. I went through this. I don't know if you went through this. I went through this grief where I knew that I was not straight from a young age, but I quashed that within myself. And I think that's why. Maybe you didn't go with the internalized homophobia stuff because you didn't see it in yourself at first.
That might be it. Yeah.
But I saw it inside myself and I said, I can't be that way. That's not the way I want to be. I don't want anybody to see me like that. I'm going to try to hide that from other people.
Baby Libby.
I was so afraid that people would think I was gay. I was really afraid of that. I didn't have any boyfriends in high school and I was terrified that people would think that about me. So I was like, let me be as heterosexual as I can.
Although I remember when we were like 20, then you told me that you were bi.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was then. That was after being at Sarah Lawrence for a little while.
That'll do it.
Yeah. But I just remember going through this moment of feeling really sad for my younger self that she couldn't be the version of herself that I am now. I just think of all the things I could have done and all the ways I could have been and all the relationships I could have had if I had not been so desirous of conforming. I went through and still sometimes go through grief around that because it really is a missed opportunity that I think I'll never get back. As you mentioned before, we missed out on being queer in our 20s. Like, how great is that? Like, I get so much joy from seeing super young queer people just living their life with freedom and happiness and joy. I love that increasingly younger people just start out with throwing out the gender binary.
I love that so much.
There's so much fluidity in themselves and there's not judgment about it.
Just living with their liminality, living with the fluidity of life. Like, oh, I love it.
I also love how much it makes other people's heads explode.
Well, part of being queer is enjoying that, right?
I don't know. Yeah, I guess
part of my queerness.
Well, you're a bit of a rabble rouser.
You know that I am.
I think I want to close, but I think you had one more really good piece of advice for people.
I mean, just holding yourself gently as you let go of all these categories. Just hold yourself so gently. It's hard to let it all go. And it's okay that it's hard. It's okay that it's confusing. It's so confusing. That's fine. It is confusing. Gender and relationships and sexuality are confusing.
Yep. And it's a transition.
It's a transition. It's this whole new you that you get to explore and whole new aspects of life you get to explore. And just be gentle with yourself and be patient. Let it come. You'll get there. You'll figure it out. It'll all become clear eventually or not. And you get to just enjoy the confusingness, the confusing, gorgeous mess.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's right on the money. Thanks for joining me in this conversation.
Thanks so much for having me here.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any thoughts about what I've said or a question for the show, you know that I would love to hear from you. You can reach me via my contact form on my website, which is libbysinback.com, or you can just email me, libby@libbysinback.com, Or you can find me on social media. I have accounts on Facebook and Instagram, and I just started a TikTok channel, but there aren't that many videos up, but feel free to check them out if you want. I'll also say that if you're loving my podcasts, but maybe feeling like your relationship could use more help, this is what I do for a living as well as for fun on this podcast. So there's 2 ways you can work with me. One, you can go to libbysinback.com/apply and sign up to do a free intro session with me to see if coaching individually is a good fit for you. I coach individual people, couples, thruples, you name it. But also, as I mentioned in the earlier part of the show, I just launched a group coaching program called the Relational Non-Monogamy Circle. And if you want to find out more about that, it's brand new. You can go to relationalnonmonogamy.com. Also, if you love this podcast, please share it with your friends, your coworkers, your business partners, your metamors, whomever, your family members, friends, etc. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And also, if you want to leave me a review on Facebook or on iTunes, it makes me feel so happy to see those because it lets me know that I'm doing a good job. Otherwise, thank you for joining me today, and talk to you soon.